Every culture on Earth has a flood story, not similar flood stories, the same flood story, a great deluge, waters rising, nearly everyone drowning, a handful of survivors on a boat or mountain, animals saved in pairs, the world washed clean and started over. The Sumerians wrote about it 4,000 years ago. They called their survivor Ziusudra. The Babylonians had Utnapishtim. The Hebrews had Noah. The Greeks had Deucalion. The Hindus had Manu. The Chinese had Gun Yu. In Australia, the Aboriginal people tell of a flood that covered the land. In South America, the Inca spoke of Viracocha destroying the world with water. In North America, dozens of tribes describe the same event. Different names, same story. Here's what's strange. These cultures never met. They developed on different continents, separated by oceans, yet they all remembered the same catastrophe. Coincidence, we say. Floods happen everywhere. People live near water, rivers overflow. Of course they tell flood stories, but that doesn't explain the details. The boat built to exact dimensions, the animals saved in pairs, the dove or raven sent to find land, the rainbow as a promise, the sacrifice after landing, the new beginning. These aren't vague similarities. They're the same story told in different languages, and it's not just floods. Every culture remembers giants, massive beings who walked the earth before us, the Nephilim, the Titans, the Jotun, the Quinametsin. Sometimes they're gods, sometimes they're monsters, but they're always there, always destroyed by some catastrophe, always leaving behind ruins too large for normal humans to build. Every culture remembers a golden age, a time before time when everything was better. No disease, no war, no death. People lived for centuries, they spoke one language, they built impossible things. Then something happened. The gods got angry, or humans got proud, and it all came crashing down. Every culture remembers dragons, not dinosaurs, dragons! Fire-breathing serpents that flew through the air and terrorized villages. The Chinese dragons, the European dragons, the Mesoamerican feathered serpents, the Aboriginal rainbow serpents, always powerful, always connected to water or weather or creation itself. We call these myths, stories people made up to explain things they didn't understand. Thunder was gods bowling, earthquakes were giants stirring, floods were divine punishment. But what if we have it backwards? What if myths aren't explanations for natural events? What if they're memories of actual events? What if every ancient story is a warning about something that really happened? Something so catastrophic that every culture that survived felt compelled to write it down? What if the myths are trying to tell us something, and we stopped listening because we decided we knew better? That's what we're exploring tonight. Not whether ancient myths are true, but what if they are? What would that mean? What were they warning us about? And why did we forget? Let's start with the giants, because they left evidence behind. Massive stone structures, bones that don't quite fit, and stories that refuse to die. In 1577, Swiss farmers found bones near the city of Lucerne. Massive bones, thigh bones longer than a man is tall, ribs you could use as roof beams, a skull that would swallow a human head whole. The city council examined them, consulted experts, reached a conclusion. These were the remains of a giant. Specifically, they belonged to one of the giants mentioned in the Bible, the ones who walked the earth before the flood. They weren't idiots. They had scholars, doctors, people who studied anatomy. But when you find a femur the size of a tree trunk, what else could it be? The bones went on display, became a tourist attraction, proof that the old stories were true. Giants had walked the earth. The Bible was right. The myths were history. In 1825, a French scientist named Georges Cuvier examined the bones. He had a different conclusion. These weren't giant humans, they were elephant bones, specifically a mammoth that died during the Ice Age. But here's the thing, the Swiss weren't the only ones finding giant bones. In 1613, a French lord discovered enormous bones near a castle. His doctors examined them, declared them human, just very, very large. The bones of a giant king mentioned in old French legends. In Greece, ancient writers described finding massive bones in the earth. They said these were the remains of heroes from the Trojan War. Men who stood 15 feet tall, warriors strong enough to throw boulders. In North America, newspapers in the 1800s regularly reported giant skeletons, 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet tall, sometimes in burial mounds, sometimes in caves, always with normal human proportions, just scaled up. The Smithsonian supposedly collected many of these, then they disappeared, lost in storage, or destroyed, or never existed in the first place. Depends who you ask. Most turned out to be hoaxes, carved stones, regular bones arranged to look larger, measurements exaggerated in newspaper stories hungry for readers, but not all of them. In 1895, miners in Ireland found a giant, 12 feet tall, petrified, turned to stone. It had 6 toes on each foot. The proportions were right. The anatomy was human, just huge. Thousands of people saw it, paid to see it. It toured as a sideshow attraction. Then it vanished. Nobody knows where it went. Was it real? Probably not, probably a clever fake made from plaster and bones. But the people who saw it swore it was genuine, swore it was stone, swore it was ancient. Here's what we know for certain. Humans have been finding large bones for thousands of years, and for thousands of years we've been calling them giants. The Greeks found mammoth skulls. The single nasal cavity in the centre looked like one giant eye socket. They called these cyclops bones, built entire myths around them. Medieval Europeans found dinosaur bones, didn't know what dinosaurs were, called them dragons or giants, whatever fit the local legends. Native Americans found mastodon bones, told stories about giant ancestors who hunted them, described battles between titans that shook the earth. Every culture did this, found big bones, fit them into their mythology, created stories to explain them. But that doesn't explain why every culture had giant mythology before they found the bones. The Bible mentions giants before any bones were discovered, the Nephilim, offspring of angels and humans, so large and powerful they corrupted the earth. God sent the flood to destroy them. The Greeks had the Titans before they found mammoth skulls, massive beings who ruled before the gods, who built the ancient walls and temples that seemed too large for normal humans. The Norse had the Jotun, ice giants, and fire giants, enemies of the gods, builders of impossible fortresses in the frozen north. The Aztecs had the Quinametzin, giants who built the pyramids, who lived in the world before this one, before the sun changed, before the current age of man. In India, the Datius, in Japan, the Oni, in Ireland, the Fomorians, in Wales, the giants of Albion. Different names, different details, same basic story. There were giants. They came before us. They built things we can't explain. Then they died, or were killed, or disappeared. Why would every culture invent the same story? You could argue it's natural. Humans are small. We imagine larger versions of ourselves. We see big animals and think, what if humans were that big? So we create myths about giants. But that doesn't explain the specificity. The giants aren't just large. They're builders. Almost every giant myth includes massive construction. Walls made of stones too heavy to move. Temples with blocks that weigh hundreds of tons. Fortresses on mountaintops where no fortress should be. And we found those structures. They're real. Baalbek in Lebanon has foundation stones that weigh 800 tons each, cut and moved and placed with precision we can barely match today. The Romans built a temple on top of them, but the Romans didn't move those stones. The stones were already there, already ancient when Rome was young. Who moved them? The locals said giants, the old ones, the builders from before. Sacsayhuaman in Peru has walls made of stones fitted so perfectly you can't slide paper between them. Some stones have 12 angles, 12 sides all cut to interlock with the stones around them. No mortar, just stone on stone. Perfect. The Spanish asked the Inca who built it. The Inca said they didn't know. It was already there, built by the old ones, the giants who came before. On Easter Island, massive stone heads stare at the ocean. Some weigh 80 tons, carved from volcanic rock, moved miles across the island, raised onto platforms. By a population that never exceeded 15,000 people using stone tools, the islanders said their ancestors had mana, power. They commanded the stones to walk, because normal humans couldn't move them. Only the old ones could do that. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is 11,000 years old, built before agriculture, before cities, before we supposedly knew how to organize large construction projects. Stone pillars weighing 20 tons each, carved with animals and symbols, arranged in circles, then deliberately buried. Who built it? We don't know. The people who lived there left no writing, no cities, no evidence of civilization as we understand it. Just this massive temple, then dirt piled on top, hidden for 11,000 years. The pattern repeats everywhere. Massive stones, impossible precision, no explanation for how they were moved. Local legends about giants. Maybe the legends came after. People saw the ruins and invented giants to explain them. That's the rational explanation. But it requires believing that every culture independently invented the same explanation. Giants who built impossible things, giants who came before us, giants who disappeared. Or maybe the legends came first. Maybe they're memories, distorted by time, exaggerated through retelling. But based on something real, not literal giants, not 15-foot-tall humans, but something. Some group of people who could do things we couldn't, who built in ways we don't understand, who existed before recorded history, before we started writing things down, and when they disappeared, we remembered them as giants, because what they accomplished seemed impossible for normal humans, so they must have been more than human, larger than human, giants. The bones we found just confirmed what we already believed. We wanted giants to be real, so when we found big bones we called them giants, even though they were mammoths or dinosaurs or hoaxes. But the structures are real, the stones are real, the precision is real, and we still can't fully explain them, so the question isn't whether giants existed. The question is, what did exist? What were we remembering? What happened before we started keeping records? And why did we remember it the same way everywhere? The myths might be wrong about the details, but they might be right about the core truth. Something was here before us. Something capable of things we struggle to match. Something that left ruins and memories and warnings. And then it ended. Whatever it was. However they did it. It stopped. The giants died. The old ones disappeared. The builders vanished. Every culture remembers this. Every culture says the same thing. There was a golden age, then catastrophe, then us. The flood came, the earth shook, the sky fell, the gods got angry, the details change, the ending doesn't. Everything that came before was destroyed, and we're what came after, living in the ruins, trying to understand what we lost. We're all falling asleep to the same mysteries, just hours apart. Subscribe and tell me where you are. From and what time is it? I always check the comments and it's fascinating. Someone in Tokyo at sunrise, someone in London at lunch, someone in California at midnight, all drifting off to the same mysteries about our shared past. Now, back to our story. The giants weren't the only impossible thing our ancestors remembered. They also remembered the sky falling, stars dropping like rain, fire from above, darkness at noon, the sun standing still. Dragons appear in every ancient culture. Not winged lizards, not fantasy creatures, something real, something people saw and tried to describe. The Chinese called them long, serpentine bodies, 4 legs, no wings. They lived in rivers and lakes, controlled the weather, brought rain or drought. Emperors claimed descent from them. Their power was absolute. The Europeans called them dragons, massive reptiles, sometimes with wings, sometimes without. They guarded treasure, destroyed villages, required heroes to kill them, St. George, Beowulf, Siegfried, all dragon slayers. The Norse called them Orma, giant serpents. Jörmungandr circled the world, Fafnir guarded gold, Nidhogg gnawed at the roots of the world tree. The Mesopotamians called them Mushushu, snake-like dragons with legs. They decorated the Ishtar Gate in Babylon, symbols of the god Marduk, real enough to carve in glazed brick. The Mesoamericans called them Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpents, gods who brought knowledge, massive stone heads carved at temple entrances, not symbolic, representational, different continents, different names, same basic description, large reptiles, often serpentine, sometimes with legs, sometimes without, always dangerous, always real. Here's what makes this strange. These cultures never met. They developed independently, yet they all describe the same creature, not similar creatures, the same creature with minor variations. We call it mythology now. Collective imagination, archetypal symbolism, the universal human need to create monsters. But what if they weren't creating anything? What if they were remembering? In 1841, British scientist Richard Owen examined strange bones at the Royal College of Surgeons. Massive vertebrae, enormous skulls, teeth like daggers. He'd never seen anything like them. Neither had anyone else. He gave them a name, Dinosauria. Terrible lizards. The bones had been sitting in collections for decades, sometimes labelled as giant humans, sometimes as unknown animals. Nobody knew what they were. They didn't fit any living species. More bones appeared, from England, from France, from Germany, always in ancient rock, always massive, always reptilian. By the 1850s, scientists realized something extraordinary. The Earth once belonged to giant reptiles. Some walked on 4 legs, some on 2. Some had long necks, some had armoured backs, some were larger than any living land animal. And then they all disappeared, millions of years before humans existed. Except here's the problem. Ancient humans found these bones too. They didn't have the word dinosaur. They didn't know about extinction or deep time, but they found the bones. They saw the massive skulls, the enormous teeth, the long serpentine vertebrae. What would you call it? If you found a skull the size of a horse with teeth like knives? If you found leg bones as thick as tree trunks? If you found vertebrae that could stack into a serpent 50 feet long? You'd call it a dragon. In 300 BCE, Chinese historian Chang Qiu wrote about dragon bones found in Sichuan province. Locals collected them, ground them into medicine, sold them in markets. The descriptions match dinosaur fossils. The locations match known fossil beds. In ancient Greece, historian Herodotus described winged serpents in Arabia. Their bones littered a mountain pass. He saw them himself, drew them. The descriptions match pterosaur fossils, flying reptiles with massive wingspans. Fossils abundant in that exact region. In medieval Europe, farmers regularly found large bones in the earth. They called them dragon bones, hung them in churches, displayed them as proof that the old legends were true. Many were later identified as dinosaur fossils. Native American tribes told stories of giant reptiles. The Anasazi drew them on canyon walls. Long-neck creatures, reptilian bodies. The drawings are near fossil beds, rich with sauropod bones. The Ica stones of Peru show humans hunting large reptiles. Carved images of stegosaurs, triceratops, sauropods, dismissed as hoaxes. But some stones are ancient, found in pre-Columbian graves, dated to before Europeans arrived, before anyone knew what dinosaurs looked like. In Cambodia, the Temple of Ta Prohm has a carving, built in 1186 CE. It shows a stegosaurus, perfect plates along the spine, correct proportions, accurate details. Nobody in 1186 CE should have known what a stegosaur looked like. The first Stegosaurus fossil wasn't discovered until 1877, unless they found bones, unless they saw the plates, unless they carved what they found. Not every dragon legend comes from fossils. Some might be crocodiles, some might be large snakes, some might be pure imagination. But the global consistency suggests something real, something people actually encountered. Consider the details that match. Dragons are always reptilian, not mammalian, not bird-like, reptilian, just like dinosaurs. Dragons are always described as ancient, from before human time, from the age when the world was different, which matches when dinosaurs actually lived. Dragons are often found in caves or buried in the earth, where fossils are found, not walking around, not living, but preserved in stone. Dragons guard treasure. Why? Perhaps because people found fossils in mineral-rich areas, in places where gold or gems were mined. The bones and the wealth came from the same ground. Dragons are killed by heroes. Why? Perhaps because finding a complete fossil was rare and valuable. Claiming to have slain a dragon meant you'd found something extraordinary. The Chinese emperor's dragon robes show creatures with 4 legs and serpentine bodies. No wings. This matches the majority of dinosaur body plans, not the Hollywood version, the fossil version. European dragons often have wings. The regions where these legends are strongest have abundant pterosaur fossils, flying reptiles with massive wingspans. Their bones are hollow, fragile, but distinctive. In Australia, Aboriginal stories describe the rainbow serpent, a massive reptile that shaped the landscape. Australia has extensive megafauna fossils, giant monitors, massive crocodiles, ancient reptiles that would dwarf modern species. The evidence isn't proof, it's suggestion, a pattern that fits. Ancient people found bones, massive bones, reptilian bones. They tried to make sense of them. They created stories. Those stories became legends. Those legends became myths. We separated the myths from reality, put them in different categories. One is true, one is false, one is science, one is superstition. But maybe the separation is wrong. Maybe the myths are distorted memories, memories of real things encountered in an age before scientific classification. The dragon isn't a fantasy, it's a fossil. The monster isn't imaginary, it's extinct. Our ancestors weren't making things up. They were trying to explain what they found, doing their best with the knowledge they had. They found evidence of a world that came before, a world of giants, a world of monsters, a world that ended in catastrophe. They were right about all of it. They just didn't have the vocabulary we have now. So when ancient texts describe dragons, when cave paintings show massive reptiles, when temples carve creatures that match fossil records, maybe we shouldn't dismiss them so quickly. Maybe they were documenting something real, something they actually encountered. Not living dragons, but the bones of dragons, the evidence of a lost world. The myths aren't warnings about imaginary monsters, they're memories of real ones, creatures that actually walked the earth, just not when we thought, not in human time, but in deep time, in the age of reptiles, and somehow across thousands of years the memory survived, changed, distorted, mythologized, but not invented, never invented, just remembered. The flood myths don't just describe water from above, they describe water from below. Genesis says the fountains of the deep broke open, not rain first, the deep, whatever that means. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes the same thing. The underground waters burst forth, then the rain came, but the deep opened first. The Greek flood myth says Poseidon struck the earth with his trident. Water exploded from the ground. The sea rose up from beneath. Hindu texts describe the cosmic ocean breaking through. Waters that existed under the world, held back by divine power, released in catastrophe. Why would every culture specify this detail? Water from below. Not just rain. Not just rivers overflowing, something breaking open from underneath. In 1923, a geologist named Reginald Daly proposed something radical. He called it the glacial control theory. During ice ages, massive amounts of water get locked in glaciers, sea levels drop hundreds of feet, coastlines extend miles beyond where they are now. When the ice melts, that water returns. Fast. The last ice age ended about 12,000 years ago. The ice sheets covering North America and Europe began to collapse. Billions of tons of ice turned to water. Sea levels rose, not gradually, in pulses, sudden jumps when ice dams broke. Lake Agassiz sat in central North America, larger than all the Great Lakes combined, held back by ice. Around 8,000 years ago, the ice dam failed. The entire lake emptied into the ocean in a matter of weeks, maybe days. The sea level jumped. Everywhere, all at once. Coastlines flooded, islands disappeared, river valleys became bays. The Black Sea was a freshwater lake, smaller than today, about 150 feet lower. Around 5,600 BCE, the Mediterranean broke through. Water poured over what's now the Bosphorus Strait, a waterfall 50 miles wide, 10 cubic miles of water per day. The lake filled, rose, became a sea. People lived on those shores, settlements, farms, villages, all drowned. In months, maybe weeks. Robert Ballard found them, the underwater archaeologist who discovered the Titanic. He used sonar to map the Black Sea floor, found ancient shorelines, underwater river valleys, and structures, buildings, foundations, settlements that went underwater suddenly. The radiocarbon dates match. Around 5,600 BCE, right when the myths say the flood happened. The Persian Gulf was dry land during the Ice Age, a river valley, fertile. The Tigris and Euphrates flowed through it, continued another 100 miles to the sea. Then the ice melted, the ocean rose, the valley flooded, became the Persian Gulf. Where did Sumerian civilization appear? Right there, at the head of the Persian Gulf, around 4000 BCE, after the flooding, with no apparent precursor, just suddenly there, with cities, writing, agriculture, organized religion, like they came from somewhere else, somewhere that no longer exists, somewhere now underwater. The Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia was exposed during the Ice Age, larger than India, connected Indonesia, Malaysia and mainland Asia, a vast lowland, rivers, forests, perfect for human habitation. Then the seas rose, it flooded, became the Java Sea, the South China Sea, gone. Genetic studies show something strange. Modern Southeast Asian populations have high genetic diversity, more than you'd expect from a small founding population, like they came from a much larger population, a population that lived somewhere that no longer exists. The myths in that region describe a lost homeland, Sunderland, a paradise that sank beneath the waves. Not Atlantis. Different stories. Same pattern. Australia was connected to Tasmania during the Ice Age. Aboriginal stories describe when you could walk to Tasmania, when it was part of the mainland, then the sea rose, the land bridge flooded, Bass Strait formed, Tasmania became an island. The Aboriginal people remember this, in their oral traditions, passed down for 10,000 years. They describe the flooding, the islands appearing, the coastline changing. Scientists dismissed these stories as myths. Then they checked. The stories are accurate, down to specific details about which areas flooded first. The Yonaguni Monument sits underwater off Japan. Massive stone structures, terraces, steps, right angles, channels. Some archaeologists say it's natural, erosion, coincidence. Others say it's clearly worked stone, architecture, a submerged city. The debate continues, but here's what's not debated. It went underwater about 10,000 years ago, when the seas rose. If people built it, they built it before the flood. The flood, myths specify something else. They say the fountains of the deep opened, not just sea level rising, something breaking open from below. In 2001, researchers discovered massive freshwater reservoirs under the ocean floor, aquifers, sealed by rock layers, containing fresh water trapped since the Ice Age, under pressure. If those seals broke, if the pressure released, fresh water would explode upward, through the ocean, reaching the surface, the fountains of the deep. It sounds insane, except it happens. Underwater springs exist, massive ones. Off the coast of Florida, fresh water pours from the seafloor, visible from the surface. Sailors have known about them for centuries. The Mediterranean has them, the Caribbean, the Black Sea. Anywhere there are limestone formations and underground aquifers. The fresh water finds cracks, pushes through, erupts from below. During the Ice Age, these aquifers were huge, pressurized. When the ice melted, when the seas rose, when the pressure changed, they could have released, catastrophically, not everywhere, but in specific locations where the geology was right, where the aquifers were largest, where the seals were weakest. The myths describe these locations: the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, the Black Sea region, the Mediterranean coast, the Indus Valley, all areas with extensive limestone, underground water systems, geological instability. The flood wasn't one event, it was many events, over thousands of years. But to people living through it, each event was the flood, the catastrophe, the end of the world. Some floods came from rain, some from rivers, some from the sea rising, some from below, from the fountains of the deep, from aquifers releasing, from the ground itself betraying them. They remembered all of it, compressed it, combined it, created a single story: the flood, the deluge, the time when the waters came and destroyed everything. We separated it, made it scientific. Sea level rise, glacial melt, isostatic rebound, aquifer dynamics, different processes, different timescales, different mechanisms. They experienced it as one thing, water rising unstoppable, from above and below, from every direction, drowning the world they knew. The evidence supports them. The coastlines did flood, the settlements did drown, the sea did rise, the land did sink, the fountains of the deep did open, not in 40 days, not all at once, but over centuries, pulse after pulse, catastrophe after catastrophe, each generation watching the water rise, watching the land disappear, watching the old world drown. They built boats, saved what they could, animals, seeds, knowledge, moved to higher ground, started over, remembered. The memory survived, changed, simplified, mythologized, but not invented. The flood happened. Many floods happened. The myths are distorted memories, memories of real catastrophes, real loss, real survival. We found the evidence underwater, the drowned settlements, the submerged coastlines, the flooded river valleys, everything the myths described, just not where we expected, not on mountaintops, not in deserts, underwater, where the myths said it would be, under the sea. The fountains of the deep did open, the waters did rise, the world did flood, not everywhere, not all at once, but enough to destroy civilizations, enough to force survivors to flee, enough to create a memory so powerful it survived 10,000 years. The myths aren't warnings about divine punishment. They're warnings about the earth itself, about geological instability, about climate catastrophe, about how quickly everything can change. Our ancestors survived it. Barely. They remembered, passed it down, made sure we'd know, made sure we'd understand. The water can rise, the land can sink, the deep can open. It happened before. It could happen again. The ice is melting, the seas are rising, the aquifers are pressurized, the geology hasn't changed. We have better technology. Now. Better predictions, better preparations. But we have the same vulnerability. We live on coasts, near rivers, on floodplains, in the same places our ancestors lived, the same places that flooded before. The myths tried to warn us. We called them stories, called them legends, called them impossible. Then we found the evidence, underwater, right where they said it would be. Fire from the sky takes many forms. The Greeks described Phaethon, son of the sun god. He begged to drive his father's chariot, just once, across the sky. His father refused, too dangerous. The horses were wild, the path was narrow. One mistake and the world would burn, Phaethon insisted. His father relented, gave him the reins, warned him. Stay on the path. Don't go too high. Don't go too low. Keep the horses steady. Phaethon couldn't control them. The chariot veered, dropped too close to earth. The ground caught fire, rivers boiled, mountains exploded, cities burned, forests turned to ash. Zeus had to stop it, threw a thunderbolt, killed Phaethon, sent the chariot crashing into a river. The fires went out, but the damage was done. The world was scorched, blackened, changed. The Hindus describe something similar. Indra's weapon, a fire that fell from heaven. It killed demons, destroyed cities, left the earth burned and smoking. The texts describe the heat, the light, the destruction. Everything in its path turned to ash. The Norse myths talk about Ragnarok, the final battle. Fire giants march from the south, led by Surtur. He carries a flaming sword. When he swings it, the sky catches fire. The world burns. The stars fall. Everything ends in flames. The Hopi people described the end of the Third World. Fire rained from the sky. Volcanoes erupted everywhere. The ground shook. The air filled with smoke and ash. Only a few people survived. They moved underground, waited for the fires to stop. The Aztecs believed the world had been destroyed 4 times. The 4th destruction came from fire. The sky rained flames. Everything burned. The survivors became birds, flew away from the destruction. Different cultures, different details, same basic event. Fire from above, widespread destruction. The world changed. A few survivors. We dismissed these as myths, metaphors, stories about divine anger, moral lessons, not history. Then we started finding the evidence. In 1908, something exploded over Siberia, near the Tunguska River. The blast flattened 800 square miles of forest. Trees knocked down in a radial pattern, all pointing away from the centre. Witnesses 40 miles away saw a fireball in the sky, brighter than the sun. Then an explosion. The shock wave circled the Earth twice. Seismographs detected it worldwide. Nobody knew what happened. The location was remote. It took years to mount an expedition. When scientists finally reached the site, they found devastation, but no crater, no meteorite, just flattened forest and scorched ground. The best explanation: an asteroid or comet exploded in the atmosphere, about 3 to 5 miles up. The airburst released energy equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. But because it exploded in the air, it left no crater, just destruction. If that happened over a city, millions would die. Over Tunguska there were only trees, a few reindeer herders. They saw the fire in the sky, felt the heat, watched the forest burn, survived to tell about it. Now imagine that happening in 3000 BCE, over a populated area. What would survivors say? Fire fell from the sky. The gods were angry. The world burned. We barely escaped. That's exactly what the myths describe. In the 1980s, scientists discovered a layer of iridium in rock formations worldwide. Iridium is rare on Earth, common in asteroids. This layer dated to 66 million years ago, right when the dinosaurs went extinct. The conclusion was clear. A massive asteroid hit Earth. The impact threw debris into the atmosphere, blocked the sun, cooled the planet, killed the dinosaurs. They found the crater off the coast of Mexico, the Chicxulub crater, 110 miles wide. The asteroid was about 6 miles across, hit with the force of 100 million megatons, 1 billion times more powerful than Tunguska. The impact created a fireball that spread across the continent. Everything within 1,000 miles burned instantly. The debris thrown into the atmosphere rained back down, red hot. The entire planet's surface heated up, like being inside an oven, for hours. Nothing larger than a cat survived on land. That was 66 million years ago, long before humans. But it proved something. Impacts happen. They cause global catastrophes. They rain fire from the sky. In 2013, a meteor exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia, much smaller than Tunguska, only about 60 feet across, but it still injured 1,500 people. The airburst shattered windows across the city. The shock wave was recorded worldwide. Dashcams captured the fireball streaking across the sky. Nobody saw it coming. No warning, no prediction. Just suddenly there. A ball of fire in the morning sky. Then an explosion. Scientists estimate objects the size of the Chelyabinsk meteor hit Earth every 60 to 100 years. Tunguska-sized objects every few hundred years. Dinosaur killer-sized objects every 100 million years. But here's what matters. Between these extremes, there's a range. Objects large enough to cause regional catastrophe, to destroy cities, to rain fire over hundreds of miles, to create the kind of event that survivors would remember, would pass down, would turn into myths. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests exactly this. Around 12,800 years ago, the planet was warming, the Ice Age was ending. Then suddenly temperatures dropped, crashed, the cold returned, lasted for 1,300 years, then just as suddenly the warming resumed. What caused the temperature crash? One theory says an asteroid or comet, not large enough to cause extinction, but large enough to cause catastrophe. It broke apart in the atmosphere. Fragments hit the ice sheets covering North America. The impacts threw ice and water into the atmosphere, started massive wildfires. The smoke and debris blocked the sun. Temperatures dropped. The evidence? A layer of microscopic diamonds found in sediment from that time. Nanodiamonds. They form under extreme pressure and heat, like an impact. Also, a layer of carbon, soot, from massive wildfires, found across North America, Europe, parts of Asia. Not everyone agrees with this theory. The evidence is debated, but it fits the timeline, fits the myths, fits what people would have experienced. Fire from the sky, the world burning, the cold that followed, the darkness, the hunger, the death. The myths describe this. The Greek said Phaethon burned the world. The Hindu said Indra's fire fell from heaven. The Norse said the sky would burn at Ragnarok. The Hopi said fire rained down and ended their world. What if they weren't predicting the future? What if they were remembering the past? Volcanic eruptions create fire from the sky. Not asteroids, not comets, just the Earth itself, exploding. Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, destroyed Pompeii and Herculaneum. The eruption threw rock and ash 20 miles into the air. The column collapsed, sent pyroclastic flows racing down the mountain. Superheated gas and rock, moving at 100 miles per hour. Temperature over 1,000 degrees. Everyone in Pompeii died, instantly. The heat killed them before the ash buried them. The city was preserved, frozen in time. We can walk the streets today, see the bodies, still there, still reaching, still trying to escape. That was a medium-sized eruption. VEI 5 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. The scale goes to 8. Mount Tambora erupted in 1815, VEI 7. The largest eruption in recorded history. It threw so much ash into the atmosphere that it blocked the sun. 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed worldwide. Snow fell in June, in New England, in Europe. Hundreds of thousands starved. But even Tambora was small compared to what's possible. Yellowstone is a supervolcano. It's erupted 3 times in the past 2 million years. The last eruption was 640,000 years ago, VEI 8. It threw 240 cubic miles of material into the air, covered half of North America in ash, changed the global climate for years. When Yellowstone erupts again, and it will, the destruction will be catastrophic. Not just locally, globally. The ash will circle the planet, block the sun, cool the climate, destroy crops, cause mass starvation, fire from the sky, then cold, then darkness, then death, just like the myths describe. Lake Toba erupted 74,000 years ago, in Indonesia, VEI 8, the largest eruption in the past 2 million years. It threw 670 cubic miles of material into the air, created a volcanic winter that lasted years, maybe decades. Genetic studies suggest human populations crashed around this time. dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals. We almost went extinct. The bottleneck shows in our DNA. All humans alive today descend from that small population, the survivors. They would have seen the fire, the ash, the darkness, the cold. They would have watched most of humanity die. They would have remembered, passed it down, generation after generation, the time the sky burned, the time the world ended, the time only a few survived. That memory would last, would change, would become myth, but it would survive. The myths aren't fantasies, they're memories, distorted by time, simplified, combined, but based on real events, real catastrophes, real fire from the sky. We have the technology now to track asteroids, to predict volcanic eruptions, to prepare. Our ancestors didn't. They just watched, survived, remembered. The fire can fall again. The volcanoes will erupt again. The asteroids will come again. The myths tried to warn us. We called them stories. We were wrong. Let's talk about something even older than fire or floods. Something that crawls through almost every ancient story. The serpent, or the snake. Sometimes it's giant. Sometimes it talks. Sometimes it's just there, waiting, watching, always deadly. Everywhere you look in the ancient world, there's a snake at the heart of the mystery. Not just a regular snake either. Usually it's massive. Sometimes it has wings. Sometimes it can speak or shapeshift. Sometimes it lives in water. Sometimes in the roots of the earth. But always it's dangerous. Sometimes wise. Sometimes pure evil. Often both. Let's start with the oldest stories we know. In the Sumerian city of Eridu, there's a legend about a giant serpent called the Great Dragon. It guarded the watery abyss beneath the earth. The god Enki had to defeat it to create safe land for humans. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero seeks a plant that grants eternal life. He finds it, but as he rests, a snake steals it away. The secret of immortality, lost forever to a serpent. Jump to Egypt. The sun god Ra rides his solar boat through the sky by day, but at night he travels through the underworld. Every night he battles the giant serpent Apophis. Apophis tries to swallow the sun and end the world. Every morning Ra wins and the sun rises again, but it's a close call. Sometimes Apophis bites the boat and you get an eclipse. The Egyptians believed that if Ra ever lost, the world would end in darkness forever. The Greeks had plenty of serpent stories too. The most famous is probably the Hydra, a huge snake with 9 heads. Cut one off, and 2 more grow back. It lived in the swamps, poisoned the air and water, killed anyone who came close. Hercules had to kill it as one of his 12 labours. He needed help just to survive the poison in the air. There's also Python, a giant serpent who guarded the oracle at Delphi. Apollo, the sun god, had to kill Python to take over the oracle. Afterward, the priests at Delphi claimed their power came from Apollo, but the earlier stories said it belonged to the serpent first. India has the Nagas, not snakes in the usual sense, but snake beings, half human, half cobra, sometimes helpful, sometimes deadly. They live in underground kingdoms full of treasure and wisdom. The stories say the Nagas control rivers, rain, and fertility. If you cross them, you risk drought or flood. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and the Aztecs spoke of the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, a god who looked like a giant snake covered in feathers. He brought knowledge, taught people to farm, invented writing, but he was also a bringer of storms and chaos. Sometimes he left and promised to return. Sometimes his return meant the end of an age. China's dragons aren't the fire-breathing monsters of Europe. They're long, snake-like creatures. They control rivers, rain, and luck. They live in water, not caves. Emperors claim to be descended from dragons, giving them the right to rule. Every new dynasty claimed the dragon as their symbol. The dragon dance is still performed today to bring good fortune. In the Bible, the serpent is the enemy from the very beginning. In the Garden of Eden, the snake tempts Eve with the promise of knowledge. She eats the fruit. Adam follows. They're cast out of paradise. The world changes forever. The serpent is punished, forced to crawl on its belly and eat dust. But the story goes deeper. In the book of Numbers, the Israelites are attacked by fiery serpents in the desert. Moses makes a bronze snake. Anyone who looks at it is healed. The snake brings death, but also healing. It's never just one thing. The Norse myths have Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, so huge it circles the world, biting its own tail. When it lets go, the world will end. Thor, the thunder god, is its sworn enemy. At Ragnarok, they're fated to kill each other. The end of the world will come with the death of the serpent. Even in West Africa, the Dahomey people believe in a rainbow serpent named Dan. Dan holds up the sky, keeps the world from falling into chaos. If Dan ever drops the sky, everything ends. You see the same thing in Australia. Many Aboriginal groups talk about the rainbow serpent, a huge snake that shaped the land, carved rivers, made mountains. It brings rain and fertility, but if angered, it can cause floods and destruction. It's not just old myths. The serpent shows up in art, jewelry and temples everywhere. The ancient Greeks put snakes on their healing god's staff. That symbol is still used for medicine today. The Egyptians painted snakes on royal crowns. The Aztecs built temples shaped like coiled serpents. The Chinese carved dragons into jade, bronze and stone. So what's going on? Why do snakes and their bigger, scarier cousins, the dragons, show up in every story from every continent? Why do they always seem to be the enemy, or at least a threat? Let's look at what we know about actual snakes and humans. There's a theory called the snake detection hypothesis. It says that humans, and even our distant primate ancestors, evolved to spot snakes quickly. Our brains are hardwired to notice snake shapes in the grass, even before we notice other dangers. People, even little kids, can spot a snake faster than almost anything else. It's baked into our brains, and for good reason. Snakes are dangerous. Venomous snakes kill around 100,000 people every year, even now. In the past, before boots, medicine, or anti-venom, a snake bite was often a death sentence. One wrong step in the grass or jungle could end your life. That kind of danger leaves a mark, not just on genes, but on stories. But that doesn't explain everything. Most snakes aren't that big. None are as huge as the ones described in the myths. No snake breathes fire, grows wings, or circles the world. So where did the rest come from? Some scientists point to fossils. In South America, they found the bones of a snake called Titanoboa. It lived around 60 million years ago after the dinosaurs. It was over 40 feet long, thicker than a telephone pole, big enough to eat a crocodile whole. Imagine stumbling across bones that size, or even just hearing stories about it. It would stick in your mind. In Africa, there's the Mokelembembe legend. Stories from the Congo tell of a huge reptile that lives in rivers and swamps. Some explorers in the 1900s went looking for it, thinking it might be a dinosaur or giant snake that somehow survived. They never found proof, but the stories keep going. There's another idea too. Before humans spread across the world, there were massive animals everywhere. Giant crocodiles in Africa, huge monitor lizards in Australia. Komodo dragons still live in Indonesia. They grow up to 10 feet long, have toxic saliva, and will attack humans if hungry enough. In the past, Australia had Megalania, a lizard over 20 feet long. It went extinct around 50,000 years ago, right when humans arrived. But imagine your ancestors seeing one of those, or finding its bones. You'd remember. You'd warn your kids. Maybe the story would grow in the telling, but the serpent isn't just about size. It's about what it represents. In almost every myth, the snake is the enemy of order. It lives in the wild, the dark, the unknown. It hides in water, under rocks, in the roots of trees. Sometimes it brings chaos, floods, storms, or even the end of the world. Sometimes it guards something precious, treasure, wisdom, eternal life. Think about the stories. In Eden, the snake brings knowledge, but also exile. In Gilgamesh, the snake steals immortality. In Egypt, Apophis tries to end the sun's journey. In Greece, the Hydra poisons the land. In India, the Nagas can bring both blessing and disaster. In China, the dragon brings rain, but can also cause floods. It's always a balance. The serpent isn't pure evil, it's nature at its most powerful. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes deadly, but it's never safe, never fully tamed. There's another layer. In many cultures, the serpent is linked to cycles, death and rebirth. Snakes shed their skin, they seem to die, then come back new. That's why they show up in healing myths. In Greek temples, people would sleep among sacred snakes, hoping for dreams that would heal them. In Hinduism, the snake god Shesha holds up the world and rests between cycles of creation and destruction. The Ouroboros is a symbol from Egypt and Greece, a snake eating its own tail. It means eternity, the endless cycle, life, death, rebirth. It's carved on tombs, drawn in books, even used in chemistry to show repeating cycles. But serpents also show up when worlds end. In Norse myths, Jörmungandr letting go of its tail means the end of days. In Revelation, the last book of the Bible, a dragon rises from the sea to fight the archangel Michael. That dragon is called the Ancient Serpent, linking back to the snake in Eden. So do all these stories just come from fear of snakes? Or is there something more? Some researchers think the serpent is a symbol for ancient disasters. Think about rivers flooding, volcanic eruptions, or earthquakes. The ground shakes, cracks open, water or fire bursts out. It looks like a giant snake moving under the earth. Sometimes, after an earthquake, the ground splits in long winding lines, like a serpent's track. Volcanoes too. Lava flows look like snakes. They twist and turn, glowing red, burning everything. Ancient people saw this and told stories about fire serpents living under mountains. When the mountain erupted, they said the serpent was angry. Some Hawaiian myths describe the volcano goddess Pele as a shapeshifter who can appear as a woman or a serpent. When the volcano explodes, it's her wrath. Lightning also looks like a snake. It zigzags across the sky, strikes suddenly, brings fire and destruction. Some Native American tribes call lightning the sky serpent. In the Amazon, the Yakumama is a giant snake said to live in the river. It controls storms and floods. When the river rises and destroys villages, they say the Yakumama is moving. There's even a theory that the serpent represents ancient comet impacts. When a comet enters the atmosphere, it can look like a glowing snake or dragon. The long tail, the bright head, the sudden flash. Some Chinese records describe comets as heavenly dragons. The Aztecs called them star serpents. When one appeared, it was a sign of disaster, but not every serpent is a destroyer. In some stories, the snake is the guardian, the protector of hidden knowledge. In Greek myth, the oracle at Delphi was guarded by Python. Only after Apollo defeated the serpent could humans learn the future. In India, the Naga king Vasuki is wrapped around Shiva's neck. He's not an enemy, but a symbol of power. Even in the Bible, there's a strange twist. In the Gospel of John, Jesus compares himself to the bronze serpent Moses raised in the desert. The symbol of death becomes a symbol of salvation. It's never simple. So what does all this mean? Why do our oldest stories keep coming back to the serpent? Why does it show up everywhere? Always powerful, always close to the end or the beginning of the world. Part of it is fear. Snakes are dangerous. They kill quietly, suddenly. They can hide almost anywhere. That's enough to haunt anyone's dreams. Part of it is respect. Snakes survive where nothing else does. They shed their skin and come back new. They can go months without food, then strike with perfect timing. That looks like magic. But a bigger part might be memory. Our ancestors saw things we can't imagine. Giant snakes, huge lizards, strange bones buried in the earth, disasters that split the ground, sent rivers out of their banks or brought fire from the mountain. They didn't have science to explain it. They had stories. Those stories grew, changed, got mixed with dreams, fears, hopes, became the myths we know now. But somewhere in the middle of all that, there's a warning. Something about danger hiding in plain sight, about the world changing in an instant, about how close we always are to chaos. Maybe that's why the serpent is never just a monster. It's a test, a guardian, sometimes a teacher, sometimes a destroyer, but always it's there at the edge of the story, waiting. We like to think we've outgrown these fears, that we know everything now, but if you look at our symbols, they're still there. The medical sign with the snake, the dragon on flags, the serpent in fairy tales and movies. We still tell these stories. We still feel that chill when something moves in the grass. We still wonder what else is out there, just beyond the light. And maybe that's the real lesson. Some dangers never go away. They just change shape. As we move through history, giants fade, dragons become fossils, floods become ancient memories, but the serpent remains, sometimes hidden, sometimes right in front of us, always part of the story. Next, we'll see how all these threads, giants, dragons, floods, fire and serpents, tie back to one final story, the lost paradise, the place we can never return to, the first home, the garden at the start of everything, and the reason we're always searching for a way back. So let's talk about paradise. Not just any paradise, the first one. The garden at the start of everything. The place every culture remembers, even if the names and details change. The one we lost and have been searching for ever since. You see this pattern everywhere. There's a memory of a time when humans lived close to the gods, or in harmony with nature, a land with no hunger, no war, no death. The weather was gentle, the food was easy to find. People didn't have to work to survive. It was always described as a garden, an island, a land across the sea, or a mountaintop. Sometimes it's hidden by clouds or guarded by spirits. Sometimes it's just gone, lost forever after a single mistake. Let's start with a story most people know, Eden. In the book of Genesis, the first humans live in a perfect garden. They walk with God. They don't know shame or suffering. There's only one rule: don't eat from the tree of knowledge. But they do, and everything changes. They're cast out. The world outside is harsh. Pain replaces peace. Work replaces play. But here's what's strange. The story of a lost paradise isn't just from the Bible. It shows up everywhere. In ancient Sumer, there's a story about Dilmun, a pure, bright land where people did not get sick or die. No one got old. There was no violence, The gods lived there before coming to Earth. But Dilmun didn't last. Something changed. People were forced to leave. The Greeks had the Golden Age. In this time, people lived like gods. The earth gave food without farming. No one grew old. There were no wars. But then comes a fall. Zeus decides people have become too proud or too clever. He sends suffering, toil, and death. The Golden Age ends. People are left in a world that's colder, meaner, and full of problems. India tells of Satya Yuga, the first of 4 ages. In Satya Yuga, truth ruled. People lived thousands of years. No lying, no disease. The land produced everything, but the age passed. Evil crept in. Each new age got worse. Now, according to tradition, we're living in the worst one, Kali Yuga, a time of confusion and struggle. The perfect age is gone. You see the same thing in China. The age of perfect virtue is a time when rulers are wise, the seasons never fail, and people don't need laws. They just do what's right. But that age ends with a mistake, or a loss of virtue. After that, everything becomes harder. Further north, the Norse myths talk about a place called Asgard, a realm of the gods. There was a time when the world tree was whole. No monsters threatened the gods. There was plenty for everyone. But then comes a broken promise, a fight, and the beginning of the end. The good times never last. In the Pacific, the Maori people speak of Hawaii, a homeland across the sea. It's the place their ancestors came from. It's described as perfect. The food is always fresh. The seasons are gentle, but it's gone. No one can return. In West Africa, there are stories of the first village where people and spirits lived together. There were no secrets, no hunger. But something happened. A rule was broken, or a line was crossed. The spirits left. The people had to learn to survive on their own. Native American stories also have this pattern. The Cherokee remember a time when animals and humans spoke the same language. The world was balanced. Then people stopped listening, or grew greedy. The animals went silent. The world changed. These aren't just old stories, told for fun. They're memories, they're warnings, they're attempts to explain why life feels so much harder than it should, why we remember something better, even if we can't describe it exactly. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Archaeologists and scientists have looked for evidence of a real paradise, not a magical garden, but time or place when life was easier. Is there any sign that ancient people really had it better? Let's look at the evidence. For most of human history, people lived as hunter-gatherers, small groups, moving from place to place, no farming, no permanent homes. But here's the thing. Many scientists think this life was actually pretty good. People worked fewer hours than farmers. They ate a wider variety of foods. They were generally healthy. Their bones show less disease than people who farmed later. There's an old saying, the original affluent society. It's about hunter-gatherers. Anthropologists found that groups like the Kung in Africa or the Hadza spend only about 20 hours a week getting food. The rest of the time they rested, played or told stories. They didn't have much, but they also didn't need much. But then something shifted. Around 10,000 years ago, humans started farming. They settled down, built villages, grew crops. At first this sounds like progress, but the bones tell a different story. Early farmers were shorter, their teeth were worse, disease and injuries went up. Farming meant more food but less variety. Plagues spread faster in crowded villages. You see it in ancient sites like Çatalhöyük in Turkey. One of the first big towns. People lived close together. The walls of their houses touched. There were no streets, just doorways in the roof. The bones found there show arthritis, infections, and even violence. Life was harder in some ways than before. Why did people make the switch? Farming let populations grow. More children survived. Villages turned into cities. Cities became kingdoms. Soon you get kings, armies, and taxes. But the old freedom, hunting, gathering, moving with the seasons, was gone. Some researchers think the memory of paradise is really a memory of the world before farming, when life was simpler and the land provided enough. The first gardens weren't magical. They were real places, forests filled with fruit, rivers full of fish, places where life was easy for a while. But paradise never lasts. As populations grew, people used up resources. Forests shrank, animals disappeared, rivers ran dry. People had to work harder just to survive. The stories of paradise faded into memory. There's another angle. Around 12,000 years ago, the last ice age ended. The world warmed up fast, huge grasslands turned into forests or deserts. Animals like mammoths, giant sloths, and saber-toothed cats vanished. For humans, this meant new challenges. Some lands that were rich with food became empty or dangerous. People had to adapt or move. The memory of a lost world might be the memory of that change. Let's look at a few specific sites. In the Middle East, there's a place called Göbekli Tepe. It's over 11,000 years old, long before cities or writing. People built massive stone circles decorated with animals. No signs of farming at first, just gatherings, maybe for ceremonies or feasts. Some archaeologists think it was a meeting place for groups who still hunted and gathered. A last reminder of a time when people came together, shared food, and celebrated the wild world. In North America, there's evidence that people lived along the coastlines before the seas rose. Places now underwater, shell mounds and ancient fire pits have been found on the ocean floor off the coast of Florida and the Channel Islands in California. These sites are thousands of years old. When the glaciers melted, the sea level rose over 300 feet. Whole landscapes disappeared. People lost their homes. Maybe to them it felt like losing paradise. You see a similar story in Southeast Asia. The Sunda Shelf was once a huge landmass, connecting many islands. Forests, rivers, and lakes covered the area. As the ice melted, the ocean swallowed it. People moved to higher ground. The old world became a legend, sometimes called Lemuria or the Drowned Land, the memory of a lost homeland. What about the myth of Atlantis? Plato wrote about a great island, larger than Libya and Asia combined. It was rich, full of wonders. Then, in a single day and night, it sank into the sea. Most scholars think Plato made up the story to make a point, but the idea of a lost world under the ocean keeps coming back. Every generation has searched for Atlantis. Maybe because we all sense something important lies beneath the waves. There's also the Garden of the Hesperides in Greek myth, a far-off place at the edge of the world. Apples of immortality grew there. Heroes who tried to reach it faced monsters, storms, and endless confusion. Most never made it. In the Middle East, there's the story of Iram, the city of pillars, said to be built in the desert, full of riches and wisdom. Then it was destroyed in a storm of sand, lost forever. Some researchers in the 1990s found ancient ruins buried deep in the Arabian desert, near a place called Ubar. Maybe these were the remains, maybe not. But the story is the same, a perfect place, now gone. In Central America, the Maya talked about Tamawanchen, the place of misty sky, a paradise where the gods created the first humans. After a mistake, the people were sent away. The land became hidden, impossible to return to. What do all these stories have in common? A perfect place. A mistake or disaster. Exile and loss. The world after is always harder. Here's another way to look at it. Psychologists say humans are good at remembering the past as better than it was. Nostalgia isn't always accurate, but sometimes it's based on real change. If your ancestors lived through disaster, losing land, seeing animals go extinct, or being forced to work harder, they'd remember the time before as paradise. Some researchers think these stories are also about growing up. Childhood is a kind of paradise. You're safe, cared for, not responsible for survival. Then you learn about danger, pain, and hard work. You leave the garden. That feeling never quite goes away. And then there's the role of knowledge. In many myths, paradise is lost because someone seeks knowledge. Adam and Eve eat the fruit. Prometheus gives fire to humans and is punished. Pandora opens the jar, releasing suffering. In each case, curiosity leads to loss, but it also leads to progress. Without it, we'd still be in the garden, safe but ignorant. It's a trade-off, safety for freedom, comfort for curiosity. The price of knowing is leaving the old world behind. Even today we look for paradise. People dream of getting away from it all, a cabin in the woods, a remote island, a simpler life. But the truth is, paradise isn't just a place. It's a time, a feeling, a memory. The world keeps moving. We keep changing. We can't go back. But here's what nobody really talks about. These stories aren't just about loss. They're about hope. Every paradise lost is followed by a search. People don't give up. They explore, invent, try new things. The world after paradise is tough, but it's also full of adventure. Think about it. If we'd stayed in the garden, we'd never have left Africa, never crossed mountains or oceans, never built cities or written stories. The pain of exile drives us forward, and there's something else. In many myths, paradise isn't completely lost. There's always a way back. Sometimes it's a mountain you have to climb. Sometimes a river you have to cross. Sometimes it's a state of mind, wisdom, innocence, or kindness. The gate is closed but not locked. So maybe the lesson isn't just about what we lost, but about what we carry with us. The dream of a better world. The memory of kindness and peace. The courage to start again. When you look at all the evidence, bones, ruins, rising seas, changing diets, lost lands, even the stories we tell children, it all points in the same direction. There was a change, a break, a paradise lost and a world remade. We don't know exactly what happened, but we feel it, deep down. And that feeling shapes us. It makes us reach for something more, even when we know we can't have it back. Above ground, we lost paradise, but every culture also told stories about below ground, the underworld, the land of the dead. Go back far enough, and every culture starts talking about what's below, not just beneath your feet, but deep down, under mountains, under rivers, under the earth itself, the underworld. It shows up everywhere. It's not always a place of fire and torment like in modern ideas of hell. Sometimes it's just dark. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a whole other world, strange but familiar with its own rules. It's wild how many of these underworlds are described as caves, not just any caves either. Enormous ones, winding, maze-like, long passages that twist and turn. Sometimes they open into huge halls. Sometimes they go on forever. And in the old stories, these aren't just places to get lost. They're gateways, doors between the living and the dead. Let's look at the Greeks. Their underworld was called Hades. To get there, you crossed a river called Styx. The entrance, a cave hidden in the wild places. They said real caves in Greece were actual entrances to Hades. The priestesses of ancient oracles, like at Delphi, sat in dark chambers deep in the earth. They breathed strange gases, saw visions and spoke for the gods. The cave itself was a doorway between worlds. In Italy, there's a cave called the Sibyl's Cave. Legend says the Sibyl, a woman who could see the future, lived there. People travelled for miles just to ask her questions. The cave was dark and full of echoes. Visitors described it as feeling strangely alive. The air was thick and heavy. Sometimes they'd hear voices. Sometimes they'd leave gifts and never return. The Maya in Central America believed caves were the entrances to Xibalba, the place of fear. The Popol Vuh, their sacred book, describes heroes travelling through a series of underground tests. The caves were full of traps, darkness, bats, rivers of blood. If you made it through, you could speak with the gods or even cheat death. Archaeologists have found ancient altars in real caves across Mexico and Guatemala. They're deep inside, far from light. People left offerings, pottery, jade, even human bones. In Australia, Aboriginal stories tell of the dreaming. The rainbow serpent, one of their oldest spirits, moves underground. She's said to have carved out caves and rivers as she travelled. Some caves are sacred. People aren't allowed to enter them except during special ceremonies. They're not just holes in the ground, they're living parts of the world connected to the past and future. Jump to Japan. The Kojiki, their oldest myth book, describes the sun goddess Amaterasu hiding in a cave after a fight. The world goes dark. The other gods gather and try to lure her out. They dance, they laugh. Eventually she peeks out and light returns. The cave is the border between daylight and endless night. In the Middle East, old stories talk about the Cave of the Patriarchs. It's said to be the burial place of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For thousands of years, people believed it was a link to the other world. They'd travel there to pray, ask for wisdom, or just to feel closer to the mysteries below. There's a story from Iran about the 7 caves. These were places of refuge, but also testing grounds. Heroes went into the caves, faced monsters, and came out changed. Sometimes they met spirits. Sometimes they learned secrets that nobody else knew. Native American stories often talk about caves as places where the first people emerged. The Zuni, the Hopi, and others say their ancestors came up from the underworld, climbing through a series of worlds before reaching this one. Some say they crawled out of a hole in the ground called a sipapu. Others talk about sacred caves where spirits still live. Europe is full of stories about caves as homes for fairies, dwarves, or even dragons. In Wales, the story goes that King Arthur sleeps in a cave, waiting for the right time to return. In Iceland, people still believe in hidden folk who live underground, in hills or rocks. Road crews sometimes change plans rather than disturb these places. But let's talk about the evidence. Are these just stories, or did something really happen in caves? Archaeologists have found some of the oldest art in the world deep underground. The caves at Lascaux and Chauvet in France, for example, painted almost 20,000 to 35,000 years ago. You can't just stumble into these places. Some are hundreds of feet from any daylight. The walls are covered in animals, bison, horses, mammoths. Some drawings even glow in torchlight, using minerals that reflect light. Getting into these caves was dangerous. You had to crawl, climb, or squeeze through tight passages. It was cold and pitch black. People brought torches, animal fat lamps, and sometimes even built fires deep inside. But they kept coming back, over and over, for thousands of years. Why would people do this? Some think they saw caves as sacred. as places where the world of the living and the spirit world touched. Maybe they believed drawing animals would help the hunt. Maybe it was about speaking to the ancestors. Or maybe it was just about being somewhere that felt different, mysterious, powerful, and strange. There's more. In Spain, at El Castillo Cave, someone put red handprints on the wall at least 37,000 years ago. That's before the last ice age ended. They left discs, dots, and even stencils of their own hands, like saying, "I was here," like marking the border between the seen and unseen. In the Americas, there's evidence of ancient people using caves for rituals going back at least 12,000 years. In Belize, the Acton Tunichil Muknal cave holds the remains of people who were sacrificed. Archaeologists found pottery, tools, and even jewellery deep inside. Some bones were placed in special ways, heads facing certain directions, arms crossed. It wasn't random. It was organised, careful, and meaningful. Caves weren't just for art or burials. Sometimes they were used as hiding places. During war or disaster, people took shelter underground. In Turkey, there's a whole underground city called Derinkuyu. It's more than 200 feet deep. It could hold thousands of people. There are tunnels, rooms, wells, and air shafts. Nobody knows exactly when it was built, but it's at least 3,000 years old, maybe older. The people there could lock heavy stone doors from the inside. They had stables, kitchens, even churches, all underground. Other underground cities have been found nearby. Kaymakli, Uzkunak. Some are connected by tunnels that go on for miles. People could hide for months if they needed to. It's like a real-life underworld, made to escape danger above. In Malta, the Hippodium is a giant underground temple. It's carved out of soft rock. There are chambers, corridors, and altars. The walls are decorated with spirals and patterns. It's over 5,000 years old. Archaeologists found hundreds of skeletons there. Some rooms have strange acoustics. You can stand in one spot, and your voice carries through the whole place. Some think it was used for rituals, maybe even to speak with the dead. So, here's the question. Why do people keep coming back to caves? Why do so many cultures put the underworld deep underground, in darkness, in winding tunnels? Part of it is just practical. Caves are old. They're safe from weather, from animals, from enemies. But there's more to it. Think about this. Caves are the oldest homes on Earth. Before huts, before tents, before villages. People slept in caves. They made fires, cooked food, told stories. The cave's mouth was the line between safety and danger. Inside, you were warm and protected. Outside, anything could happen. Over time, caves became more than just shelter. They became symbols. Entering a cave is like going back in time, or into another world. The farther you go, the more the world above fades away. It's quiet. It's cold. You hear only your breath, your footsteps, maybe the drip of water. It's a place to think, to dream, to imagine things you can't see. Now look at the story again. The underworld is almost always below ground. It's dark. It's mysterious. Sometimes it's scary, but it's also full of secrets. In some myths, the hero goes down to rescue someone, or to bring back wisdom, or to face a challenge nobody else can. The Greek hero Orpheus journeys into Hades to save his wife. He charms the spirits with music. He almost makes it out, but looks back at the last moment and loses her forever. In Sumerian myth, Inanna, Queen of Heaven, descends into the underworld. She passes through 7 gates, gives up something at each one, and finally meets her shadow self. She dies and returns, changed. Even in stories from China, there are tales of people visiting the Yellow Springs, a place deep below the earth where the dead live. Sometimes they come back with warnings, sometimes they bring gifts or knowledge. But it's not just about death, sometimes it's about rebirth. In the Zuni stories, the first people climb out of darkness and into the daylight. In Christian stories, Jesus spends 3 days in the tomb, a cave, before rising again. Darkness, then light. Death, then life. Caves are also places of transformation. You go in as one thing, you come out as something else, sometimes stronger, sometimes wiser, sometimes just more aware of how strange and big the world really is. Let's look at the science for a second. There are real dangers in caves. It's dark. It's easy to get lost. The air can be bad. There are pits, drops, and sudden floods, but people have always risked it. Why? Maybe because facing the unknown is part of being human. We're drawn to the places that scare us a little, or a lot. There's something else. Some of the oldest musical instruments have been found in caves. Flutes made from bird bones and mammoth tusks, more than 40,000 years old. Imagine the sound, echoing in the dark, bouncing off stone walls, music in the underworld, and in some places people made strange marks on the walls. Carvings, scratches and symbols. Some look like maps, some are just patterns, some may be the first writing, or just people trying to make sense of the darkness. In modern times we still use caves for special things. In Slovenia, there's a cave where people celebrate spring by lighting fires and singing. In France, some caves are still used for ceremonies. In parts of the United States, Native American groups hold rituals in caves, just like their ancestors did. Now here's a weird fact. Some scientists think caves helped shape human imagination. The total darkness, the echoes, the strange sounds. These things can make your mind see and hear things that aren't really there. People in caves sometimes report seeing lights, hearing voices, or feeling watched. Maybe caves helped spark the first stories about spirits, gods, and life after death. And then there's the idea of going underground as a kind of test. In myths, heroes almost always go down, into caves, under mountains, or into the earth, before coming back changed. It's not just about death, it's about facing something mysterious, coming out the other side with a new sense of self. Think about how caves show up in dreams too. People dream about tunnels, dark passages, hidden chambers. Psychologists say these are symbols for the unknown parts of our minds, the places we don't visit often, but that hold secrets about who we are. If you look at the map of the world's biggest cave systems, you'll notice something interesting. Many of them are right beneath places with powerful myths. The Mammoth Cave system in Kentucky is the biggest in the world. Local stories talk about spirits, lost travelers, and strange creatures underground. In Slovenia, the Postojna cave is tied to tales of dragons and hidden treasure. In Vietnam, Sonjong cave is so big it has its own weather. It's only been fully explored in the last few decades. But the local people always believed it was special. So here's what strikes me most. From the earliest days, people have been drawn to the dark places below, not just as a shelter, but as a way to connect with something bigger. Maybe it's the mystery. Maybe it's the challenge. Maybe it's the sense that the answers to the deepest questions aren't found in daylight, but in the shadows. And all those stories about the underworld, about caves, tunnels, hidden entrances to other worlds, they might be rooted in something real. Not just the geology, but the psychology. The way darkness changes how we think, how we feel, the way facing the unknown shapes us. We don't have all the answers. Some caves are still unexplored. Some stories are still waiting to be understood, but the pattern is there. every culture, every era. The descent below is part of the story. A warning, maybe, a challenge, or just a reminder that the world is deeper and stranger than it seems. From paradise above to the mysteries below, the journey keeps going. Giants, dragons, floods, fire, serpents, paradise, the underworld. Every myth has an explanation. But what does the pattern mean? Patterns show up everywhere in these old stories, not just the same types of creatures or disasters, but the same order. Paradise, then a fall, giants, then a flood, fire, then darkness, descent, then return. You see it over and over again, even in places where people had no contact. It's like everyone was reading from the same script. But how can that be? Why would cultures separated by oceans and centuries remember the same things, and in the same order? Some people say it's just coincidence, or that humans everywhere face the same fears: death, hunger, storms, the unknown. So of course their stories would sound alike. Maybe, but the details match up too well. It's not just fear of water, it's the world covered in water, animals saved in pairs, and a single family starting over. It's not just fear of darkness, it's the world going dark for days or years after fire or chaos. It's not just fear of big animals, it's the same creatures, serpents, dragons, giants, described again and again. Let's slow down and look why this pattern might exist. There are a few main theories. Some are pretty straightforward, some are wild, but all of them try to answer the same question. Were these myths warnings? If so, warnings about what? One idea is memory. The stories are echoes of real disasters, floods, fires, giant storms, maybe even asteroid impacts. Over time, details get mixed up. The story grows, changes, but the core stays the same. The warning is simple. This happened once. It could happen again. Take the flood stories. We know the end of the last ice age brought huge changes. Sea levels rose, coastlines vanished. Whole communities may have been wiped out overnight. Imagine living near the sea and seeing the water swallow your home. You'd remember, you'd tell your children. Don't build too close to the water. The sea can rise, the world can change. Maybe that's all it takes for a warning to become a myth. But it goes deeper than just memory. Some stories include things nobody alive could have seen. Dinosaurs, for instance. People found huge bones. They didn't know about extinct animals, so they made sense of them the best way they could. These must be giants, monsters. So the warning becomes, there were creatures bigger than any living thing. The world used to be wild. Don't forget how small you are. And then there's the serpent. Why do snakes or dragons show up everywhere? Maybe it's because snakes are dangerous. Even today, a bite can kill you. Or maybe it's because something about their shape, the way they move, the way they seem to appear out of nowhere, gets under our skin. In some places the warning is clear. Watch out for snakes, respect them. In others it's more about chaos. The snake or dragon brings trouble, shakes up the world, forces people to adapt. Here's another theory. These myths were a kind of instruction manual, not just stories but guides for survival. If you live in an area where floods are possible, it makes sense to remember the biggest one ever. If you live near volcanoes or in a place where meteors have fallen, you remember fire from the sky. If your ancestors survived by hiding in caves, you teach your children that caves are both dangerous and sacred. But what about the stories that don't match anything we see today? The Golden Age, the perfect garden, people living for hundreds of years. Some scientists think these are memories of a different world, a world that vanished. Maybe the end of the Ice Age felt like the end of paradise. The animals got smaller, the weather got harsher, food became harder to find. The story becomes, we used to have it easy, now we have to work for everything. The warning is about change. Nothing lasts forever. There's also the idea of collective memory. Some researchers believe that big events, like a flood that wipes out most people in a region, could leave a mark on the whole group. Stories get passed down from parents to children for hundreds of generations. The details blur, but the main idea survives. Be careful. The world can turn against you in an instant. But here's where it gets interesting. Some myths seem to predict things nobody could have known, like the idea of mountains once being under the sea, or fire raining from the sky, or giant creatures buried deep in the earth. Modern science has shown that these things really happened at different times. Mountains do rise from the sea, meteors do strike, huge animals did exist. So, is it possible the stories remember more than just local disasters? Are they keeping alive knowledge of things that happened far in the past? Let's talk about warning systems. Today we have sirens, weather reports, emergency broadcasts. But for most of history, people had only stories. If you want your descendants to remember to watch out for floods, you tell them about the biggest flood ever. If you want them to respect the mountains, you tell them about the giants. Who once lived there? The story sticks because it's dramatic, full of heroes and monsters. But underneath, it's a warning. Some legends even include instructions. In some flood stories, the survivor is told to build a boat to exact measurements. In some serpent stories, the hero is warned not to look back, or not to eat a certain food, or to stay away from certain places. These aren't just random details. They're rules for survival hidden inside the story. Now, think about the way myths work. They're not just entertainment. They're a way of teaching. Stories are easier to remember than lists of facts. A child might forget a boring list of rules, but they'll remember the story of the hero who escaped a flood by climbing a mountain, or the god who punished those who broke sacred laws. The myth becomes a tool for survival, a way to pass on hard-won lessons. But what if the warnings aren't just about physical danger? Some stories seem to warn against pride or greed, or forgetting your place in the world. The golden age ends when people get too proud, or try to become like the gods, or forget to respect the natural order. The flood comes when people become corrupt, or violent, or stop listening to the old ways. The lesson isn't just watch out for floods, it's don't get too comfortable. Change is always coming. Let's look at a few modern examples. In Japan, you can find old stone markers at the edge of villages, high above sea level. The stones say, "Do not build below this point." They mark where tsunamis have reached in the past. People ignored them, built closer to the water, and some villages were wiped out by the 2011 tsunami. The warning was there, but it was easy to forget when nothing bad happened for years. In Indonesia, some communities tell stories about the smoking mountain. It's a volcano. The story warns people not to farm too close to the slopes, not to cut down certain trees, not to forget the rituals that keep the mountain calm. Some of these rules seem superstitious, but when the volcano erupts, the people who followed the old ways are sometimes the only survivors. So maybe the old myths work the same way. The details don't have to be exactly right. The point is to remember the danger even after it's gone. The story keeps the memory alive long after anyone remembers the real event. Here's something else to think about. Myths might also be a way to deal with things people couldn't control. You can't stop a flood or a comet. You can't fight a giant or a serpent from the deep, but you can tell a story about someone who did. That story gives hope. It says, even when things are impossible, there's a way through. The warning isn't just about danger, it's about courage, about not giving up when everything seems lost. Some researchers think myths may also help communities recover after disaster. The story of a survivor, a hero, or a group that rebuilds after catastrophe gives people a script for what to do. We've been here before. We can make it through. We just have to remember what the old stories say. There's another angle too. Myths often talk about cycles: creation, destruction, rebirth. The world is made, then lost, then made again. The message is, everything changes, nothing is forever, but after the darkness there's light. That's a kind of warning, but also a comfort. It says, even if you lose everything, there's a way back. Now let's get a little stranger. Some people believe myths are memories of things we can't explain. Visitors from the sky, lost civilizations, ancient technology. These theories aren't accepted by most scientists, but they're popular for a reason. Myths are full of strange details: flying chariots, talking animals, weapons that sound like nuclear bombs. Are these just imagination? Or do they hide memories of things that really happened, but in a form we can't recognize anymore? It's hard to say. But even if these wild theories aren't true, they show how powerful myths are. They can turn anything, fact, dream, fear, into a story that lasts for thousands of years. Let's talk about one more thing: the underworld journey. In so many myths, the hero has to go down, into darkness, into the unknown before they can come back changed. This might be about facing death, or just facing fear. The warning here is almost philosophical. You can't avoid the hard things. You have to face them. But if you do, you come out stronger. Some psychologists think these stories are about growing up, leaving home, facing the world, making mistakes, then coming back wiser. The myth is a map, not just for the world outside, but for the world inside your own mind. So what do all these patterns mean? Why did your ancestors repeat these stories over and over for so long? Maybe it's because the world really is dangerous. Maybe it's because memory fades, but stories last. Maybe it's because people learned the hard way that forgetting the past means risking everything. But maybe it's also because stories are the only way to pass on things that can't be taught any other way. You can write down facts, but they get lost. You can carve warnings in stone, but someday someone will ignore them. But good story, it sticks. It changes as it's told, but the heart stays the same. Every myth is a kind of message in a bottle, sent across time, hoping someone will understand. Sometimes the message is clear. Don't build too close to the river. Watch for signs in the sky. Sometimes it's harder to see. Respect the world. Don't forget where you came from. Beware of pride. And sometimes the warning is just a feeling, the sense that the world is bigger, older, and stranger than it seems, that there are things we can't control, that danger can come from above, below, or inside our own hearts. But there's something hopeful in the pattern too. The hero always returns. The world begins again. Lost knowledge is found. Light comes after darkness. So, what if every ancient myth really was a warning? Not just about floods or fire or monsters, but about what happens when we forget, when we stop listening, when we think we're safe just because nothing bad has happened in a while. Maybe that's why these old stories still matter. They're not just entertainment. They're not just fairy tales. They're survival guides written in code. Warnings from people who lived through things we can only imagine. You don't have to believe every detail to see the truth underneath. The world changes. Disasters happen. People survive. But only if they remember. And what strikes me most is this. Every culture trusted stories to keep them safe. That's why myths are so powerful. They're not just about the past, they're about what might happen next. Your ancestors survived everything. They left you stories, not just to scare you, but to prepare you, to remind you that the world is full of hidden dangers, but also hidden strengths. You carry those stories now, whether you remember them or not, whether you believe them or not. They shaped the world you live in, and that's the real pattern. Not just warnings about disaster, but reminders that humans can adapt, rebuild, and start over. That's what every myth is really about. Now it's time to rest. The stories will be here when you wake. And maybe, in some small way, you'll remember warnings hidden inside them. So, after all this, where does it leave us? Why do these old warnings still echo in modern life? Why do we keep turning back to stories about floods, giants, lost worlds, and hidden dangers, even when science tells us a different story? Maybe because deep down, we know stories and facts serve different purposes. Data tells you what happened. Stories tell you what it meant, and sometimes what it could mean again. Think about how memory works. You probably remember stories from your childhood better than any list of facts you learned in school. There's something about a tale, especially one with a warning in it, that sticks. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's just the drama. But the story stays when everything else fades. Now try to picture your ancestors, hundreds of generations back. No books, no internet, no way to record anything except through word of mouth. How do you keep your children safe from things you can't fully explain? You could try to list rules, or you tell a story, one with heroes, monsters, and a lesson at the end. Over time, these stories build up. Each generation adds something new, or leaves out something that no longer makes sense. But the heart of the story survives. Don't forget the flood. Watch out for what's under the ground. Trust the old warnings, even if they sound strange. It's not just about physical danger, though. There's a deeper layer. Many of these myths warn about what happens when people get too confident, when they ignore limits, when they try to control things that can't be controlled. The message is simple. Be careful with power. Respect what you don't understand. Trust that some rules were made for a reason, even if you can't see it now. Look at the world today. We have technology that would seem like magic to the people who first told these stories. We can predict storms, move mountains, even look deep into the earth. But we still face the same risks: floods, fires, earthquakes, disease, and sometimes we make new problems, ones our ancestors couldn't have imagined. But here's what's interesting. When disaster strikes, people still turn to stories. After a big storm, you hear people say, "It felt like the end of the world." After a fire, it was like the sun burned the ground. We reach for those old patterns, trying to make sense of what just happened. Even now, the old warnings are there, just beneath the surface. Think about how we prepare for danger. We run drills for earthquakes, floods, storms. We put up warning signs, build walls, set up systems to tell us when something is coming. But there's always a gap between knowing what could happen and really believing it. That's where stories come in. They make danger real, give it a face, a voice, a history. Sometimes the warnings don't work. People ignore them. Build in risky places, cut down forests that once slowed floods, forget why the rules were made. But when disaster comes, the old stories suddenly make sense again. They become a way to explain, to cope, to rebuild. There's another side too. Stories don't just warn, they also give hope. The hero survives the flood. The world grows back after fire. People find a way through darkness, even if it takes a long time. That's not just comforting, it's a blueprint for getting through hard times. We've done this before, we can do it again. This isn't just about big disasters either. The same pattern shows up in personal lives. Trouble comes, everything falls apart, you're lost for a while. Then you find a way out. Maybe you even come back stronger. Myths map this journey over and over, down into the dark, then up again. It's a cycle, a reminder that hard times don't last forever. And maybe that's the biggest warning of all. Not just be careful, but don't give up. The world changes, bad things happen, but the story keeps going. You keep going. It's easy to think myths are just stories for children, or old people, or cultures that didn't have science, but they're more than that. They're a way of thinking about danger and survival that doesn't go away just because we have new tools. In some ways, the stories are even more important now. The dangers are bigger. The world moves faster. It's harder to remember what matters. So what do you do with these old warnings? You can laugh at them, ignore them, or try to explain them away. Or you can listen, just in case there's something important hidden inside. Maybe the details are wrong, but the core is right. The world is unpredictable. Nature is powerful. People make mistakes when they get too comfortable. And here's something else. Myths connect you to everyone who came before. When you hear a story about a flood, or a snake, or a paradise lost, you're hearing the voices of people who lived through things you can only imagine. They didn't survive by luck alone. They learned, adapted, and passed down what they knew. Sometimes in stone, sometimes in song, sometimes in story. That's a kind of legacy. Not just of fear, but of resilience. The ability to face the unknown and to share what you learn with the people who come after. That's what makes humans different from every other creature. We don't just survive, we remember, we teach, we warn. If you look around, you'll see the pattern everywhere. Not just in old books, but in new movies, video games, even the news. We still tell stories about disasters, heroes, and second chances. We still look for meaning in chaos. We still hope for a way through. Maybe in 100 years, people will tell stories about our time, about the warnings we missed, or the dangers we faced, or the lessons we learned the hard way. Maybe they'll wonder why we didn't listen to our own stories. Or maybe they'll see that we did remember in small ways, even when it felt like we'd forgotten. So next time you hear an old myth, or see a warning sign, or feel a sense of déjà vu when the world seems to repeat itself, pay attention. There might still be value in those ancient echoes, not just as entertainment, but as a guide. And maybe, when you pass on a story about your own life, or something you heard from someone else, you're adding one more link to a chain that goes back to the very beginning. Your words might be the warning or the comfort that someone else needs one day. In the end, stories are survival tools. They hold lessons, warnings, and hopes. They help you remember, even when you can't see the danger yet. They remind you that you're not alone, that others have faced chaos before and made it through. So even if you never face a flood, or a fire from the sky, or a monster in the dark, the old stories still matter. They're reminders to stay alert, to respect the world, and to trust in your own ability to adapt. They're proof that the people before you cared enough to warn you. Even if the message is hidden in dragons, giants, or talking snakes, and when you wake tomorrow, the world will go on turning. New stories will be born. Old warnings will echo in unexpected places. You'll carry them with you, whether you notice or not. Rest easy. The stories are still working, and so are you.